So welcome all. Day 4. Content and structure of the ego. The egoic mind is completely conditioned by the past. Its condition is twofold. It consists of content and structure. In the case of a child who cries in deep suffering because his toy has been taken away, the toy represents content. It is interchangeable with any other content, any other toy or object. Toy or object. The content you identify with is conditioned by your environment, your upbringing, and surrounding culture. Whether the child is rich or poor, whether the toy is a piece of wood shaped like an animal or a sophisticated electronic gadget makes no difference as far as the suffering caused by its loss is concerned. The reason why such acute suffering occurs is concealed in the word my, and it is structural. The unconscious compulsion to enhance one's identity through association with an object is built into the very structure of the egoic mind. One of the most basic mind structures through which the ego comes into existence is identification. The word identification is derived from the Latin word idem, meaning same and facere, which means to make. So when I identify with something, I make it the same. The same as what? The same as I. I endow it with a sense of self, and so it becomes part of my identity. One of the most basic levels of identification is with things. My toy later becomes my car, my house, my clothes, and so on. I try to find myself in things, but never quite make it and end up losing myself in them. This is the fate of ego. So when we are talking about the two basic paths, when we talk about the egoistic mind or the ego part of our human mind, one is the content and one is the structure. Content is anything that is an object. बच्चे के केस में the toy is there for us, my pen, my car, my house, my clothes, my shoes. And the structure comes from the identification of myself with that content. For example, जब हम एक चीज कोई चीज बाजार से लेके आते हैं, any object, it can be a new phone, it can be a new toy, new gadget, anything which is an object. I mean, irrespective of what the object can do, what its features are. But the moment now you are in a shop where you've gone to buy a phone, okay? So there are hundreds of phone in that shop. You take a particular phone, you select the phone, you see the features, you take it to the billing counter, and you make the payment. And the bill is in your name or whatever name. The moment that payment is made by you, that structure, that identification that this phone or this thing, this content is mine. आपका मीटर चालू हो गया. अगर वो शॉप से निकलते ही आपके हाथ से वो फोन गिर जाए, माय फोन, आई हैव पेड फॉर इट, माय हार्ड अर्न्ड मनी, because that identification has now been made with that phone. जब तक वो सेम फोन एप्पल की फैक्ट्री में था या जिस मर्जी का फोन था या उस दुकानदार के पास था, वो आपको दिखा रहा था, he showed you the same piece, but that identification that this is mine, that this content belongs to the identity which is I, me, myself, तब तक कोई इशू नहीं है. For example, it's the same scenario. You are at that phone shop, or that same phone which you are about to buy, before you bought it, you are just seeing it. But that connection with that content is not there because you have not labeled it or identified it as yours. और अगर वो दिखाते दिखाते दुकानदार के हाथ से वो फोन गिर जाए, you'll feel a bit bad. वो यार दुकानदार का नुकसान हो गया, पता नहीं इसके पैसे ना काट ले. That's all. And the moment you step out of the shop without buying that phone, that means without identifying that as your phone, you will forget about the instance because that association has not been made. But अगर हमने वो खरीद लिया तो वो हमारी एसोसिएशन उसके साथ एस्टैब्लिश हो गई है. So the root for everything when it talks about, the egoistic part of the mind or the egoistic mind starts with your identification. Ki this is mine. This thing, this content, this object belongs to me. वहीं से आपने अपनी ईगो को पावर देनी शुरू करी. Because the moment that identification was not there, you were not feeling so bad about it. But the moment that identification was established, and then anything happened to that, threat to the egoistic mind, this was mine. So that identification refers to that clinging on to that thing for which you have probably paid some money. But अगर हम उस identification में नहीं जा रहे हैं, this is a phone, very nice, and the payment has been made so that it could be used for some beneficial, productive purposes. It's the same thing as I am buying a phone for myself. That's the identification there. But the payment has been made for this phone so that it can be used for some productive purpose. Whether it's given to me for some time or somebody else is using that phone. But the moment we come from that premise of non-identification, that means not giving it my identity, my association, my clinginess to it, there is no ego. Identification with things. The people in the advertising industry know very well that in order to sell things that people don't really need, they must convince them that those things will add something to how they see themselves or are seen by others. In other words, add something of their sense of self. And they do this, for example, by telling you that you will stand out from the crowd by using this product. And so, by implication, be more fully yourself. Or they may create an association in your mind between the product and a famous person or a youthful, attractive, or happy looking person. Even pictures of old or deceased celebrities in their prime work well for that purpose. The unspoken assumption is that by buying this product through some magical act of appropriation, you become like them, or rather the surface image of them. And so in many cases, you're not buying a product but an identity enhancer. Designer labels are primarily collective identities that you buy into. They are expensive and therefore exclusive. If everybody could buy them, they would lose their psychological value, and all you would be left with would be their material value, which likely amounts to a fraction of what you have paid. What kind of things you identify with will vary from person to person according to age, gender, income, social class, fashion, the surrounding culture, and so on. What you identify is all to do with content, whereas the unconscious compulsion to identify is structural. It is one of the most basic ways in which the egoic mind operates. Paradoxically, what keeps the so called consumer society going is the fact that trying to find yourself through things doesn't work. The ego satisfaction is short lived, so you keep looking for more, keep buying, keep consuming. The very interesting question which we all need to ask ourselves, because everybody is in this game. I mean, I don't see much people as exceptions to this rule, but everybody once in a while has gone and bought that product somewhere here or there, seeing कि भैया मेरे को इससे कोई benefit मिलेगा या मुझे अच्छा लगेगा. Everybody does it. But why? That's the question we need to ask. Why is it that when I buy a new thing or buy new clothes, branded clothes, new gadget, new phone, new shoes, new watch, anything, मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगता है. I feel good, I feel happy, and I feel this is it. Because deep down, everybody knows that happiness is your true state of being. And there is no doubt about it. But the whole issue is वो ट्रू स्टेट जो हमारे अंदर है हम बाहर ऑब्जेक्ट्स में ढूंढ रहे हैं. बिकॉज anything and everything which is outside of you and has a form has a expiry, has a validity, has a lifespan. It's not permanent. But जो हमारे अंदर that innate state of happiness which is there deep down inside of us, that's eternal, because that belongs to the soul and that has no form. I can't see the happiness which is inside of me. I can only feel it, because that happiness is eternal, because it's part of who I am and it's part of that soul. That's the innate sense of my being. अब मुझे वो पता है कि भैया हैप्पीनेस इज माय इनर स्टेट ऑफ बीइंग, बट मैं वो चीज आउटसाइड वर्ल्ड में ढूंढ रहा हूं. सो वो टेम्पररी अच्छा लगता है, एंड वी मिस इंटरप्रेट और मिसकंफ्यूज दैट टेम्पररी uplifted mood as happiness, because happiness or love in the true form is unconditional. उसकी कोई कंडीशन नहीं है. ये गाड़ी आएगी तो मैं खुश होऊंगा, वो ये करेगा तो मैं खुश होऊंगा. नो. Happiness is our true state of being, and it is something which is inside of us, and it is purely unconditional. Anything and everything which is outside of who you are is never permanent and will always have conditions. And the first condition, what is outside of you, is that it has a lifespan, it has an expiry date, it has a validity period. क्योंकि innate sense में मेरी true happiness या true sense of love and compassion है, which is inside of me, is unconditional. Because each and every condition we refer to right now or we cling on to right now is created by the egoic part of the mind or the egoistic mind. उसी ने तो उस कंटेंट को एक स्ट्रक्चर के साथ आइडेंटिफाई किया है, तभी तो वो क्लिंजीनेस है. Deep down, that's the condition. And there's a very small line to catch this, that anything that has a condition, that has a validity, is not permanent. Whereas me, as that this soul is eternal. And that happiness and love is my true state of being, and it is also permanent. And there are no conditions to it. You know, it's interesting, I was seeing a video on Instagram, बहुत पहले का है, probably some movie clip or what, but yeah, it made a lot of sense. So there is this guy, उसने ना बाहर ही एक वॉशिंग मशीन लगाई हुई है, ओल्डन टाइम्स, ओके, जब नए नए वॉशिंग मशीन अभी कमर्शलाइजेशन प्रोडक्शन में ही आई थी, probably the 40s 50s, not sure about the exact year. And he had a fridge. So people were very confused कि है क्या, because they were seeing it for the first time. And they go to him, he said, what is this? Oh, you know, this is where you can wash your clothes, and you know, you put in the clothes from here, you put water from here, you put the detergent from here, and they will do the washing for you. Very nice, so convenient. Okay, another guy comes, he said, what is this? Your fridge, you can keep things, you know, they can last longer, you can have cold water, this and that. So he was explaining all the features which till date all marketing people or all advertising people use is the tag word called convenience. And there was one guy in that crowd said, how much does it cost? And he calculated. He said, in order to get this means I have to increase my income by this. So in order to get that convenience, what you're projecting to me, I will have to work double as I am working right now to afford this. That is where the catch is. So for that extra convenience, there is a lot of extra work so that we can earn more money. More money means we buy more of these machines in order to get that extra convenience. That's the trap. उस convenience से हम क्या कर रहे हैं? For example, if I bought a washing machine, I'm not against gadgets, okay? They are good, required. I mean, we guys are on the age where this is right, but where it started. If I buy a washing machine and the washing machine is going to wash my clothes in 2 hours, I get 2 hours to relax. But in order to make the EMI of that machine when it came, I have to work 6 more hours every day so that I can afford the EMI of the machine. कहाँ गया मेरा 2 hours of relaxation? That's how the economy is growing and growing and growing, because that's the race where everybody is in. So that supposedly convenience is actually taking more of your time and giving you more stress and more work to do in order to increase and afford these machines. So beautiful. I'll try to get that clip and I'll share. Really touching, really made a lot of sense. But yeah, that's basically what All these advertisements, advertising agencies, marketing people, they exploit is to give you that macho image. And always remember, what matters at the end of the day is your peace of mind than the convenience. So usko hamesha evaluate karo. Is it making me at ease? Or do I have to work more, take more stress, put in more work hours? For what? So try to evaluate these things. I'm not against gadgets. They are good. They're nice. If you can afford them, buy them. But they should not be spoiling your peace of mind. That's the key. Because if that gadget or that thing, which is supposedly supposed to give you happiness and convenience, ends up destroying your peace of mind, there is no point going for that. You were much better off without it then. Of course, in this physical dimension that our surface sells in a bit, things are a necessary and inescapable part of our lives. We need housing, clothes, furniture, tools, transportation. There may also be things in our lives that we value because of their beauty or inherent quality. We need to honor the world of things, not despise it. Each thing has beingness, is a temporary form that has its origin with the formless one life, the source of all things, all bodies, all forms. In most ancient cultures, people believed that everything, even so called inanimate objects, had an indwelling spirit, and in this respect, they were closer to the truth than we are today. When you live in a world deadened by mental abstraction, you don't sense the aliveness of the universe anymore. Most people don't inhabit a living reality, but a conceptualized one. But we cannot really honor things if we use them as a means to self enhancement. That is to say, if we're trying to find ourselves through them. This is exactly what the ego does. Ego identification with things creates attachment to things, obsession with things, which in turn creates our consumer society and economic structures where the only measure of progress is always more. The unchecked striving for more, for endless growth, is a dysfunction and a disease. It is the same dysfunction the cancerous cell manifests, whose only goal is to multiply itself, unaware that it brings about its own destruction by destroying the organism of which it is a part. Some economists are so attached to the notion of growth that they can't let go of that word. So they refer to recession as a time of negative growth. A large part of many people's lives is consumed by an obsessive preoccupation with things. This is why one of the ills of our times is object glorification. When you can no feel the life that you are likely to fill up your life with things. As a spiritual practice, I suggest that you investigate your relationship with the world of things through self observation, and in particular, things that are designated with the word my. You need to be alert and honest to find out. For example, whether your sense of self-worth is bound up with the things you possess. Do certain things induce a certain feeling of importance or superiority? Does the lack of them make you feel inferior to others who have more than you? Do you casually mention things you own or show them off to increase your sense of worth in someone else's eyes and through them in your own? Do you feel resentful or angry and somehow diminished in your sense of self when someone else has more than you or when you lose a prized possession? So it's very important for us, being on this path of spirituality, being on the path of ascension, in order to, everybody's here to raise our own vibration. We need to check, am I being in that phase where I have started associating with the things rather than taking the things to actually help you? You are now associated with those things. अगर वो नहीं है तो I feel at in that state of unease, because now my identification of who I am is with that thing. अगर वो है तो मैं ठीक हूं, अगर वो नहीं है, कहाँ गया यार, अभी तो इधर था, मेरा पेन कहाँ गया यार, मेरा फोन कहाँ है यार? And it's there everywhere, and I see kids also doing it. This is my phone, this is my space, this is my desk. Hello, आज वो खाली बोल रहे हैं. Yeah, when you start, it's just a small thing, but deep down the impact is the association. The mind, the egoistic part of the mind, is trying to create from who you are with an object which is external to you and which has a validity date, which has an expiry date. So we need to check, it's a very important thing. Just 1 minute, 2 minute के लिए ना, कभी भी दिन में, just check yourself. मैं, the word I, me, myself, mine, कितनी बार यूज कर रहे हैं? Being consciously aware. Or if you're having a conversation with anybody, just record yourself for 15 minutes and let your conversation flow. And after that, when you're free, just 5-10 minutes, take out those 5-10 minutes and re-hear your conversation again. You will realize how rampant and how frequent the word I, me, myself, mine are being used by this. It's being used every minute or every 5 minutes. When I did this, oh man, बड़ा मजा आता था यार. मतलब even if we want to refer to as good moments, there is an identification with that I. Probably there is an object, or probably it's not an object, but that identification of that I is always there. और जब वो आइडेंटिफिकेशन ऑफ आई एक पास्ट इवेंट पे रहती है तो वो आपके फ्यूचर को भी करती है. इट अफेक्ट्स योर फ्यूचर एज वेल, बिकॉज व्हाट इज नॉट प्रेजेंट or what is actually present in the present moment should be is just the I with no association. That's truly present. Because when I'm referring to anything from the past, I used to do that, I did that, it worked, I will do this, it shall work, I'm going to make sure that this gets done. So anything and everything, which whether it's in your past or in your future, has that strong identification and association. और वो egoistic part of the mind से आएगा, because one of the basic characteristics of an egoistic mind is that it will label it, and that label is very clearly, this belongs to me, this is mine. और जब उसको कोई छेड़ेगा, टडंग, that's the trigger we get. How can he do this to my thing or my object or my content? But if that identification is not there, this is a phone. It's being used by me for my convenience. It's the same thing, but the way you try to associate that thing as just a thing without an attachment that it belongs to you, or you are clinged on to it, identified with it. So you will need these things. So again, referring to, they are parts of the being, parts of existence. You should respect them. And if you want for your convenience, you should have them. But agar wo nahi hai, yeah, your happiness is only there because they are there, that is where the confusion is. So how you identify with your objects or things which are external to you, and how you associate and link your true identity to those things, that is where the catch is. Because if we can differentiate between this is a thing or this is something which is good and nice and productive, but I am not just identified by this thing, it's there. I remember all these. If you just take a look at your old uncles, aunts, grandparents. So that's the time where mobile phones were not there. Again, जैसे जैसे phone आए, so they were not very convenient with those mobile phones and everything. So they never made that identification with that phone. And I still remember in my childhood, कितनी बार होता था फोन ही घर भूल जाते थे. Today, can you imagine, without your phone, and you left your phone at home? You feel paralyzed. So make sure जिस चीज से आप आइडेंटिफाई कर रहे हो उसको छोड़ना सीखो. Try not to be so associated and so dependent on this. I know a lot of people say, my work is based on this, my work is... Agreed, not your holidays. You have times where you have a work off. You have times where you say, okay, I'm on a break. And what are we doing in that break? Again, coming to that mobile phone. That is the biggest addiction which is there on planet Earth right now. It's much bigger than any other addictions that have been on the planet. So start with this. जो आइडेंटिफिकेशन हमने इंपॉर्टेंस मोबाइल फोन को दी ना, उसको दिन में 1 घंटे का ब्रेक देना शुरू करो. घंटा, 2 घंटा, 3 घंटा. And I am not boasting, but there are times where I just put my phone on charge. My phone does not have any notifications, so I don't check. I don't get to know who's sending me what. When I know that this is the time to check, I will open and check. That's the most convenient thing I have ever done with myself. And nothing suffers. Nothing suffers. You are at ease. So especially when you're putting your phone on charge, start by putting your phone on charge during the day, because that is time you know you will not use it for 2 hours. That's the start. हमारा कन्वीनियंट वे क्या है? रात को चार्जिंग पे लगा दो, यूज तो करना नहीं है, सुबह तक चार्ज हो जाएगा. दिन में करो चार्ज यार, so that you don't use it and you stop that association with this biggest addiction of the planet. Everything has a usage and everything has a misusage. It's for us to identify that identification, whether I want to use it or be misused by it. Because if it's used and there is not a strong identification, that means the ego is not much at play. Because एक association इतनी strong नहीं है. But if it's on that misuse category, the identification of the ego is so strong that slowly it will start affecting other areas also. So start with your mobile phone. And very simple, notifications off. That's what I do. And put it on charge during the daytime. 2 घंटे तो दिए हैं. It works for me. That's why I'm sharing. The lost ring. When I was seeing people as a counselor and spiritual teacher, I would visit a woman twice a week whose body was riddled with cancer. She was a school teacher in her mid 40s and had been given no more than a few months to live by her doctors. Sometimes a few words were spoken during those visits, but mostly we would sit together in silence. And as we did, she had her first glimpses of the stillness within herself that she never knew existed during her busy life as a school teacher. One day, however, I arrived to find her in a state of great distress and anger. What happened? I asked. Her diamond ring, of great monetary as well as sentimental value, had disappeared. And she said she was sure it had been stolen by the woman who came to look after her for a few hours every day. She said she didn't understand how anybody could be so callous and heartless as to do this to her. She asked me whether she should confront the woman or whether it would be better to call the police immediately. I said I couldn't tell her what to do, but asked her to find out how important a ring or anything else was at this point in her life. You don't understand, she said. This was my grandmother's ring. I used to wear it every day until I got ill and my hands became too swollen. It's more than just a ring to me. How can I not be upset? The quickness of her response and the anger and defensiveness in her voice were indications that she had not yet become present enough to look within and to disentangle her reaction from the event and observe them both. Her anger and defensiveness were signs that the ego was still speaking through her. I said, I'm going to ask you a few questions, but instead of answering them now, see if you can find the answers within you. I will pause briefly after each question. When an answer comes, it may not necessarily come in the form of words. She said she was ready to listen. I asked, do you realize that you will have to let go of the ring at some point, perhaps quite soon? How much more time do you need before you will be ready to let go of it? Will you become less when you let go of it? Has who you are become diminished by the loss? There were a few minutes of silence after the last question. When she started speaking again, there was a smile on her face, and she seemed at peace. The last question made me realize something important. First, I went to my mind for an answer, and my mind said, yes, of course, you have been diminished. And then I asked myself the question again, has who I am become diminished? This time I tried to feel rather than think the answer. And suddenly I could feel my I amness. I have never felt that before. If I can feel the I am so strongly, then who I am hasn't been diminished at all. I can still feel it now, something peaceful, but very alive. This is the joy of being, I said. You can only feel it when you get out of your head. Being must be felt. It can't be thought. The ego doesn't know about it because thought is what it consists of. The ring was really in your head as a thought that you confused with the sense of I am. You thought the I am or a part of it was in the ring. Whatever the ego seeks and gets attached to are substitutes for the being that it cannot feel. You can value and care for things, but whenever you get attached to them, you will know it's the ego. And you are never really attached to a thing, but a thought that has I, me, or mine in it. Whenever you completely accept a loss, you go beyond ego and who you are, the I am, which is consciousness itself, emerges. She said, now I understand something Jesus said that never made sense to me before. If someone takes your shirt, let him have your coat as well. That's right, I said. It doesn't mean you should never lock your door. All it means that is something, if that is that sometimes letting things go is an act of far greater power than defending or hanging on. You know, there's a very nice example of, how we associate things with our identity of who we are into objects ki we start living by those things rather than actually living as to who we truly are. because हम इतना उस ऑब्जेक्ट को या आउटसाइड चीज को इम्पोर्टेंस दे देते हैं कि दैट बिकम्स आवर आइडेंटिटी which is actually speaking or literally speaking not your identity. But the moment we make a conscious choice of letting go, because that's the whole issue of letting go starts from detaching yourself. हमने अपने आप को अटैच किया हुआ है, हमने उस चीज से अपने आप को क्लिंग किया हुआ है, और जो हमने किया है दैट इज पार्ट ऑफ द माइंड ऑफ मी, माई माइंड. द सोल इज नॉट attached to anything. The whole concept of why is it that the mind is attached to it and not the soul is because the thoughts only come from the mind. But what you feel comes from the soul. So जो attachment की thought है, that's all a pretentious perception associated with the mind. But whereas it is not felt, the moment it is felt, anything that is felt, that is coming from the soul. So it's very nicely said in a lot of other books. The mind thinks, but the soul feels. So whenever you have a very strong feeling, please be very, very clear, it's coming from your soul. But whenever it's the thought or that chatterbox, it's not the soul. It is just the egoistic part or the conscious part of the mind speaking. So each and every thought and the association with that thought is always and always of the mind, never of the soul. In the last few weeks of her life, as her body became weaker, she became more and more radiant, as if light was shining through her. She gave many of her possessions away, some to the woman she thought had stolen the ring, and with each thing she gave away, her joy deepened. When her mother called me to let me know she had passed away, she also mentioned that after her death, they found her ring in the medicine cabinet in the bathroom. Did the woman return the ring? Or had it been there all the time? Nobody will ever know. One thing we do know, life will give you whatever experience is most helpful for the evolution of your consciousness. How do you now? This is the experience you need, because this is the experience you are having at this moment. It is wrong then to be proud of one's possession or to feel resentful towards people to have more than you. Not at all. That sense of pride, of needing to stand out, the apparent enhancement of one's self through more than and diminishing through less than, is neither right nor wrong. It is the ego. The ego isn't wrong. It is just unconscious. When we observe the ego in yourself, you are beginning to go beyond it. Don't take the ego too seriously. When you detect egoic behavior in yourself, smile. At times, you may even laugh. How could humanity have been taken in this by this for so long? Above all, know that the ego isn't personal. It isn't who you are. If you consider the ego to be your personal problem, that's just more ego. So, ego is just a part of your mind. It's an identification in which it has been given so much of importance over the period, as if the mind is my true identity of this soul, of the consciousness inside, that has, given more importance than required to the mind, which builds in the egoistic nature or the egoistic part and dwells more upon it by clinging on to things, by attaching to things, and basically what the ego wants is just looking for attention seeking. That's the pure way of looking at things, or what the egoistic mind is looking for is just attention. चाहे वो pleasure की हो, चाहे वो pain की हो, egoistic mind is not bothered. It wants attention. And the moment we step onto that state of letting the egoistic part of the mind know and stop identifying ourselves with something other than who I truly am, that diminishes the sensitivity of the egoistic part of the mind, or the egoistic mind. And then what remains is just a still mind with not much of those thoughts as well. So that's what they said when you're talking about the lady. She experienced that stillness of the mind. हिंदी में नहीं बोलते बड़ा चंचल मन होता है. Chanchal Mand is rampant thoughts. That rampant thoughts is a bombardment of thoughts by the egoistic part of the mind in order to seek your attention, in order to seek for you to do something so that, there is more attention. That's all what ego does. So we close the reading today here.